The views and opinions and statements expressed by the interviewee, Sarah Teague, during this podcast episode are hers alone and do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the host, the production team, or any associated entity. Now, this podcast is a platform for open discussion, and we aim to present diverse perspectives. The host role, my role, is to facilitate the conversation, not to endorse every view or opinion shared by the guest. Now, listener discretion is advised due to the fact that we will show some pictures, some documents that may be disturbing to others. So, welcome to Front Porch America, and this is the first time I have been able to interview someone that has not been in the studio. Now, I'm no Shay McAllister, but this is my first true crime podcast, and I have a lot to learn about those. This is just breaking the ice. There's a lot more to what we discussed than what we have fit into this hour and a half to 2 hour conversation. So sit back, relax the best you can, and listen to 30 years of relentless pursuits of the mother of missing Heather Teague, Miss Sarah Teague. It's that time to thank our sponsors, and we're going to run down this list. We're going to talk about the Fat Boy app, the locally owned mom and pop restaurant locator. Listen, if you're tired of eating from those chain restaurants and you want a mom and pop restaurant, download the Fat Boy app and become a dining diva or a fat boy today. Go to their website at www.fatboyapp.com. Check it out. You get perks for becoming a dining diva or a fat boy. You're traveling this summer and you want somewhere local to eat that's not a chain restaurant. You're going to need this app. This app's going to guide you to where you want to go to that good food. So download them today, available on Android and iOS. That's the Fat Boy app. Become a dining diva and fat boy today. Stephen Watson at Watson's Transmission, he is your go-to guy. We got to thank him. Man, he's your go-to guy for transmission work. And I'm telling you, if my transmission ever goes out, I'm going to Stephen. I don't know what else to do. I'm going to go to Stephen and be like, hey, Stephen, do your magic. Work your magic on this transmission, because he can bring them back to life. If he can't fix it, then it's really broken. He's going to get you another one. So check out Stephen Watson at Watson's Transmissions. Ironstein Coffee there in Morganfield, Kentucky. You want some hometown brewed coffee, hometown roasted coffee beans there in Morganfield, Kentucky. My favorite's the Miner. I like that dark roast. I like it dark, good old dark, strong coffee is what I like. That's my favorite. So go check out Jerry and his buddy there at Ironstein Coffee in Morganfield. And while you're there, slip on into Jen's General Store. Check her out. Hey, I went in there today to get a haircut from Jerry, and I walked through Jen's, and they got a little pathway. It's like the Candyland board is what it looks like. And it just kind of took me back. And there's candies, and there's drinks, and, man, they do milkshakes and sandwiches, and it's so cool. There's so many things in there to check out. A lot of local items. I think there's some local honey in there from a fella there that lives in the county. So there's all kinds of things there at Jen's General Store. Go back in time to when you were a kid, especially us Gen Xers, man. There's all kinds of our candies in there. I love going in there. Every time I go in there, it's you feel welcomed, and you're taking a trip back in time. So check out Jen's General Store. Wolf's Customs, that's Jake Wolf in Waverly, has got you covered this summer. You need a radiator flush, you need some coolant, your vehicle trying to overheat because it's going to get hot outside, or your tires are just low, or you need a lift on your truck, you need your brakes changed. Holler at Jake Wolf at Wolf's Customs there in Waverly, Kentucky. Are you looking for a private property, a commercial property? You looking for your first house, your second house, your third house, your neighbor's house? It doesn't matter. You looking for some property to buy? Holler at Josh Parrish at BHG Realty. Listen, Josh has got it going on, man. He's a good dude. He's straight up with you, and he can find you the piece of property or the building or the land, whatever it is you're looking for. Josh is the guy to go to. I promise you that. He's going to help you every which way he can. And if he can't get it or doesn't know how to get it, he's going to reach out and he's going to exhaust all his resources for you, because he wants to be your realtor. So check out Josh Parrish at BHG Realty for the next time you're looking for that home away from home, or you just want to buy your neighbor's home. It's for sale. Why not? Holler at Josh. He's going to take care of you. I promise you that. You're rolling around in Booneville, up there, Boone, Vegas, up there, Booneville, Indiana. You're up there at the McDonald's on top of the hill, and you look over and you see this place is called Warwick County Tire. Well, that's the place you need to go if you need tires. You need air in your tires. You need your tires plugged. You need your tires patched. You need tire work. You need brake work. Go see Billy at Warwick County Tire. He's going to take care of you like he took care of me. True story. I ordered some tires from him. Hey, dude, I was in and out in no time. Professionally done. Fantastic service. And I'm not just saying that because I know Billy and Billy's family. I'm telling you because he takes pride in what he does at Warwick County Tire. So go see Billy at Warwick County Tire up there in Booneville, Indiana, and Boone, Vegas. Give a new shout out to Hackney Door Company. We'd like to thank them for the apparel we're wearing today. You got the Hackney Door Company hat and shirt on. Shane out there in Crittenden County, out there in Marion, Kentucky at Hackney Door Company. Listen, you need garage doors, you need building doors, you need doors that open and doors that close and doors that don't squeak and doors. You need a door. Holler at Shane Hackney at Hackney Door Company. We're going to put that information up for you too. So give him a call for all your door needs. And we appreciate you, Shane, for sending us the shirt and the hat. And we definitely appreciate your support here on Front Porch America. So I think that's our sponsors. So let's get to the podcast.
Respect, no judgment. Open up, say what you want to say. Be real, be kind, free speech. Make this a better day. You got a voice, a story to be heard. Share it on the Front Porch America.
So welcome to Front Porch America, and today's podcast interview is a one of a kind for me. You guys know I normally don't do a true crime podcast, but I just felt like I needed to reach out to this lady sitting on the other side of the camera, and this is my first attempt at a non-studio interview as well. So y'all bear with us, and today we're going to uncover some stuff that the public doesn't know, a lot of information that has been released to you. And when I say you, ladies and gentlemen, this is Sarah Teague, the mother of missing Heather Teague. Now, Heather's been missing for almost 30 years, August 26th. Is that right, Miss Sarah? Will
Yes.
be 30 years. So let's just cut to the chase. You had a lawsuit that was going on, and you were pretty much had a gag order. Now that lawsuit has been dropped, dismissed, and we'll get into that. You have freedom to release documents and pictures and documents. And when I say documents, we'll talk about how many documents you have, how much information, and how long you've been searching for your daughter. Obviously, 30 years. So with that being said, give us a backstory on Heather. Just kind of tell us about her from a young age up until, she disappeared.
Heather was born April the 25th, 1972. Heather weighed 7 pounds, 1 ounce. She was 20.5 inches long. She looked like a little chicken in her first picture. Heather was my little shadow. We had a song that we sang, wherever we go, whatever we do, we'll always go through it together. Heather could print her ABCs when she was 2.5 years old. And I remember I kept looking in Heather's eyes, and I would say, I can see me in your eyes, Heather. And one day she looked at me and she said, Mommy, I can see me in your eyes.
Oh,
Right before this happened, 10 days before this happened, Heather was reported missing. And I saw Heather the Thursday before this happened. She was so angry. She was disgusted with me. She was disgusted with life. And when 10 days before this happened, she had decorated my home in a bizarre way that led my daughter Holly to think that she had committed suicide. And
so
her
can we
daddy,
talk about that, how she decorated it and maybe why she did it that way?
I can just say it's bizarre right now. She had a light, that involves this Ricky banking guy, and I don't I don't want to get into
Yeah,
that.
no,
I
that's fine.
can't get into that.
But it was some unusual activity for her
It
to
was
do.
bizarre. It was bizarre. She had the front door locked, so I would have to go in the back door, and she had objects and things lined up all the way down the hall to the bedroom. And well, when she was found later that night, um, she said she was just trying to communicate with me. My life was in such a mess at that point, and the last day I saw her was Thursday, and I had just enrolled back in college, and I prayed that she would be on my couch when I got home, and she was. She was laying on the little love seat, and I covered her up with a sheet and sat right beside her, watching every little move she made, because she and I both knew there was just something about to happen. And the last thing she said to me, she was mad because she had just gone to the doctor and found out her scoliosis was worse. And of course, she said she was mad for not drinking milk when she was little. It was way beyond that. It was way beyond that.
Right.
Now that I know what I know, and when she left that day, I watched her drive away, and I said, Heather, why are you so angry? And she said, I wish. I think she said, I wish I knew, but I'm wondering now if she said, I wish you knew, because I remember we stood outside and she seemed to think somebody was following her. And like I say, my life was such a mess with this man that I was seeing, and she didn't want me to stop seeing him when I had discovered something absolutely horrible. So when she left that day, I just knew we would have tomorrow to get things right. You know, I had just started back to college and I was eliminating these people from my life. I didn't even have a car then, but I thought we would have tomorrow, and we didn't.
Wow.
So on August the 26th of 1995, we got a phone call from Henderson Police Department. And the first two calls, they were seemed to be in a panic. They said, "Do you know where Heather is?" And we're like, "No." "Hang on a minute, let me call you right back." On the second call, they did the same. "Are you sure you don't know where Heather is?" And this was late in the afternoon.
And
And
this is the day she went missing?
yes,
Okay.
and we said, "We don't know where she is." And then on the third call, somebody from the Henderson Police Department said Heather left her car abandoned on Newburgh Beach. Now, by this late in the afternoon, they surely would have known Tim Walthall's story that Heather had been dragged into the woods by her hair with a gun by a man 6 foot, 210 to 230 pounds.
So when you're contacted by the Henderson Police Department asking, do you know where Heather is? She had already been abducted. Okay.
Well, allegedly, because what they told us was Heather had left her car abandoned on Newburgh Beach. By the time we got there were yellow police tapes everywhere, and we were directed to
So,
Lieutenant David
so
Osborne.
wait a minute, wait a minute. And we're going to get into this. We're going to get into some pretty crazy stuff. And
Because you
wow.
know that James Hendricks worked for
Right.
Henderson Police. Right,
So Henderson Police is saying she left the car abandoned,
right.
but there is
Hmm.
a call placed, and we're going to get into that next. Call placed to Kentucky State Police and other agencies saying that a witness seen Heather being drug into the woods. So she didn't leave the car abandoned. She was abducted, and the car was left there that way. So,
Allegedly.
right. Okay.
Don't
So
really
let's
know
get into
what,
that.
yeah, we don't really know what happened that day, because the August 30th issue of the Gleaner states plainly, and this was 4 days after Heather was abducted. The witness claims he called 911, but there is no record of any such call. Now, had he called 911, it would have gone to Warwick County Sheriff's Department, Bruce Hargrave. He did not make a 911 call.
So he call a personal acquaintance? Or did he call directly into the station, unlike the non-emergency line?
All I know is for 12 years, I asked almost daily to hear the call that this man had made to the Kentucky State Police on in 2007 when Heather had been gone for 12 years. My then attorney Chip Adams and I went to Henderson Court, the courthouse, and we were supposed to have met the judge, and we were to be given the call so we could hear the call that Tim Walthall had made to Kentucky State Police. And you've got the record there where the newspaper where it says David Crafton is saying we don't usually release 911 calls, but well, you know, a 911 call is public record. So after 12 years, as soon as we got off the elevator, we were stopped by Lieutenant Scott Miller, KSP, and he asked us would we settle for the time and location of that call. And we were given 115 to Indiana State Police, not to State Police. It took 20 years before we finally heard the call that Tim Walthall did make to Kentucky State Police.
So and that call, that actual 911 call is available to be heard online. You can actually find that call now. There's
Well,
other
911, but like I say, there was no, he did not, he didn't need any help. He didn't call 911 for help. In fact, he waited at least 45 minutes, if not 1 hour and 15 minutes before he made the call at all.
So I've got an operations log here in front of me from the Indiana State Police and the FBI. Um, you know this paper probably better than I do.
Yes.
It states James Verley, post commander, Indiana State Police. Gives an address, Evansville, Indiana, some redacted information. Provided the following information regarding on August 26, 1995 from redacted name. An operations memo and log dated that on August 26, 1995, it shows Sergeant redacted received a telephone call from, and we know who that you can give those names now, Tim Walthall, at 1:15 p.m. regarding a possible abduction on the Kentucky side of the Ohio River. And the log states that Tim observed a female subject sunbathing with her top off. He then observed a subject with a beard with a chrome-plated gun drag her by the hair and viewed this struggle through his telescope. Now, in that 911 call, Sarah, you've probably listened to it over and over and over and over. He gives such great detail. Now, either A, he had a really powerful scope, and I think they said it was a 25 scope on this telescope, and I don't even know what that would look like. But he said in the 911 call, and it's crazy to me how calm, cool, and collected that he is about this situation because even as a first responder, I still get worked up on scenes. I get worked up when, my adrenaline gets running. I felt like unless he was, and I'm just making speculation 100%, in this line of work for a long period of time, and he was able to remain as calm as he did. And I want people to find this 911 call and listen to it. And I may try to get it downloaded and put it up on here so people can hear. It's about 8 minutes long. He is so cool, calm, and collective, and he gives very distinct details. Like the gun, I knew it was nickel or chrome plated because it glistened in the sun. The beard, and let's talk about that 911 call.
Well, we were told that a man 6 foot 210 to 230 pounds with dark bushy hair and beard had dragged Heather into the woods. So, like I say, for 12 years we tried to hear the call. It took 20 years before we did hear the call. And in this call, I had to ask the sergeant to stop because the scenario of how we had been told for 20 years that Heather had been taken, what we had told from the very beginning for 20 years was that the man his wife saw a man standing in the trees, and then Tim got his binoculars or his telescope, and then he sees the man creep down slowly to where Heather lay, face down on her chair. He even says at one point she was looking to the left at the point. so she couldn't see the man creeping down. As he crept down to where she lay, he appeared to be whispering to her, and as he was whispering, he was wrapping her long hair around his wrist, and then he jerks her up. He even describes how her little feet were dangling from the ground and she could not scream because her hair was wrapped so tightly. Now, you can hear on the call that they kept from us for 20 years, he says the man charged down to where Heather lay, yanked her up by the back of the head of the hair. Well, I just had to stop Sergeant Jason Pagan from playing that. And it was after we had heard the call and gone home, and I heard it, after it had been uploaded, I heard it again. And he states not only was the way Heather had been taken was not the same, but he even states, I've been waiting 25 minutes for her to come back. That is one reason that they kept the call from us for 20 years. Of course, now I know that there were 6 different labels for that one call, and an FBI agent's name is underneath one, and an FBI agent's initials are in 3 of those 6 different labels.
Let's talk about those labels real quick for the listeners so they'll understand exactly what you mean when you say labels. So let's go through those real quick.
Okay. I need to tell this part because this is a huge part of it.
Yes.
On July 27th of 2023, after having been so just devastated, another open record appeal had not been acknowledged. I walked down the hall. It was July the 27th, 2023 at noon. And I just cried out to God and said, please let me have Heather back. And I wrote this down. I usually keep a pen in my hand most of the time. I wrote it down. These words came to me. An undeniable truth is coming. They can no longer deny, and they will have no choice but to tell our family. So 2 days later, on July the 29th, I sat down at the computer as I've done hundreds of times and opened the KSP audio files. And I opened Tracy _ DUI _ reviewed and heard Bill Polk telling the state police on day 4, Marty doesn't fit that description. He is shorter, he is lighter, and Marty does not have bushy hair and a beard. And that was one of the most humbling experiences I've ever had. I could barely walk after I knew that for 28 years I had fought not only to hear the call that he had made, but I had been telling the state police and bringing in evidence, in which we're going to go through all that too, that Marty Dill was bald and he was not the man who did this. So I was in communication with, or I was sending messages to Lieutenant Pryor with the state police. And I shared with him what God had given me about the undeniable truths. And 2 days later, I also shared with him and sent him the audio that was totally mislabeled in their files, where they knew, I knew that they knew all those 28 years at that time. Every time I would stand in front of them with the sketch, I'll show that, the laminated poster, all the evidence I had presented for 28 years, they already knew on day 4. So God just kept revealing things. And so I opened the 911 audio to post. Well, it opens to 07120-251-YF _Q1 _ENH redacted. Well, that opens to enhanced copy of Q1. And then that opens to the same numbers with ENH redacted again, but this one has Catherine Seabrook's name underneath it. Then another label was Wathall 911 Heather Teague parentheses audio white CD2, and then another one is white CD2 in parentheses with the same number, the numbers and the Q1 with ENHWAV. Now, the timestamp is in the middle of this, which I just thought it was the length of the call. But
Okay.
the 13.07.59 is 108 military time. So the call he made to Kentucky State Police was 108, and it lasted until 13.15.49, which is approximately 116.
Right.
So he could have called Indiana State Police at 116, as the FBI file state, and as they gave us in 2007 after 12 years. But the point that they gave us the time and location, and there's not one word on that. According to Captain Bailey at Indiana State Police, he remembered the call and the information was put on a sticky note. So the next morning, when Tim Walthall calls back at 10:40 to Indiana State Police, the same thing. They put it on a sticky note.
And I'm following along with you here on that. And at one point it says we had been looking for the female who was in the created call KSP and Walthall made with the wig and the mosquito netting.
Oh, wow. Wait
Where
till
does
you.
that fit in?
Okay, so I kept bringing in evidence that Marty was bald.
Okay,
I
so
did.
let's go to that right there. So the description of the abductor, the alleged abductor, given by Tim Walthall on August 26th across from the river in Newburgh using his telescope. He says in the 911 call, what? What did this guy look like?
He was 6 foot, 210 to 230 pounds, dark bushy hair, and a beard. But
Okay.
the point of that is they waited 4 days before a sketch was done at all.
So
And
this sketch
right.
was done 4 days after the fact they got this driver's license picture.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And only after the film of Marty Dill's dad's Bronco was filmed was a sketch done at all.
Now that was filmed by a guy a farmer had hired because they were tearing up his crops, correct?
Right. Right.
And if people have been following this case, I'm sure they've listened to other podcasts and watched some videos, and there's several of them that talk about figures being spotted in the Bronco, standing beside the Bronco in Heather's car. Um, but so Marty Dill's driver's license photo from what year? 1994.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the composite sketch done after they received Marty Dill's driver's license, correct? So there's that. Okay. So we've got that. And what did Marty Dill actually look like at that time?
Marty Dill was 5'10", 180 pounds, and he had been clean shaven, beard, hair, and all, and he was buff. He had no beer belly, pot belly like the witness had described. That is on July the 15th, 1995 at 1:22 p.m., only weeks before Heather was taken. Marty Dill, just like Bill Polk told them on day 4, did not fit the description in any way.
So this picture right here is when of Marty.
July the 15th, 1995 at 1:22 p.m., only a few weeks before Heather was taken.
So there is no way, and we'll get into the other details of how this description changed. Before Heather was taken, after Heather was taken, the description given by Tim Walthall, and you believe it was used. The sketch came from the driver's license picture,
I
which
have
I mean,
proof that that sketch was actually the same sketch was done in a rape in 1994. Did you get the purchase order that I sent?
I did.
Did you see what that says on a July the 14th, 94 invoice? It has kidnapping and Heather's case file on it.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
And we'll get into that. I don't want to get you off track, but so we kind of laid out the body of
right.
what the guy had seen. This is the sketch. This is the body of somebody else, and we'll get into talking about that here in just a little bit.
Okay.
The similarities minus the tattoos, but the tattoos were found to come after the fact.
Right.
So the 911 tape you don't even hear for 20 years, 12 years.
No, 20 years. The way that happened after the meeting on August the 27th of 2008, when 4 officers were in the room at KSP with me, my daughter Holly, and my then attorney Chip Adams. The call was played with Tim Walthall saying the man who took Heather wore a wig and a mosquito netting, or he had bushy hair and a beard. My
Okay, and
daughter,
that's where I was talking about the other descriptions of
mhm.
Tim comes in when Tim actually looks like this, and then they realize. Do you think they realize that, oh crap, Mr. Walthall did not have hair, and they threw the mosquito netting and wig in just to try to say, oh, he may have been wearing this or that?
No, what happened is the only suspect in the rape in on July the 13th of 94, the man who raped this lady in broad daylight in a cemetery in Clay, Kentucky, and she and I have spoken many times through the years.
Mhm.
He did wear a mosquito netting. So
Okay.
to further implicate Marty Dill, in fact, we were told Marty had raped a girl a year before and he wore a mosquito netting. Marty, well, I get the DNA results from Bill Polk, his attorney. Marty, as you know, Marty was exonerated or he would have been imprisoned for the rape
Of that lady in
before.
the
But then you
cemetery.
got the artist, the same artist who did the sketches of Heather, yes, the same artist who did the sketches August the 30th of 95 had written on an invoice July the 14th of 94, the day after the rape, kidnapping and Heather's case file 16-95 1327. That's written on a 94 invoice. So, in other words, Clay Hutchison, the artist, had already drawn Marty Dill's face from the 94 driver's license because I showed it to the girl lady who was raped, and she said, yes, that's the picture that they showed.
So so they didn't even actually draw this in 95. This was something that he had already had
Well, he may
previous.
have drawn it again,
Okay.
but
Okay, I
yeah,
see what you're saying. I see
yeah.
what you're saying. Either way, it doesn't match Mr. Deal.
Oh, absolutely. It would have been Chris Below, the body of the sketch, had
And
KSP not manipulated Marty Dill's face after they saw the film of the Bronco.
and this is the
Right.
sketch of the body. Yeah,
And
there's your poster.
and
Yeah.
this is Chris Below's body and face. The entire sketch would have been Christopher Below had they not panicked and needed a suspect after they saw the film of the Bronco. Now, anybody can tell you that the first 24 hours to 48 hours is crucial in what the eyewitness gives as a description.
Mhm.
So they wait 4 days, and only after they saw the film of the Bronco was a sketch done.
But here's the thing. They had access to that 911 call where Mr. Walthall gives a unremarkable description of the abductor, right? So
Right.
they could have always went back to that. The artist in the KSP or whoever could have always went back to that and listened to that tape and drew out the sketch of what he said. So even though it was 4 days later, they still had a reference point because when he describes the person allegedly taking Heather, he gives detail like he's standing in front of them. You know,
Absolutely.
I honestly, listening to that 911 tape, or that call, if you will, I kept waiting for him to say he's got a mole on his right arm, or that's because that's how descriptive it was. And I'm still just kind of everybody handles trauma different, and I'm calling that trauma because if Mr. Walthall actually witnessed that abduction, that's pretty traumatizing to see something like that. And I know in the 911 call, and I don't want to give a lot of details out because I want people to go and listen, to go and search for this stuff on Heather, to kind of you know keep it active, if you will. The more people we have go and dig a little bit, and it's not hard to find that call. It's almost on every podcast that's been done about Heather. It's out there, but it doesn't make any sense to me. Everybody's trauma is different, but if like I told you before, if I seen somebody getting abducted, my adrenaline's pumping. It's going. I'm gonna be worked up, but man, the guy was just like literally sitting, drinking a cup of coffee and reading the Sunday
Well,
paper, it seemed like.
he says he was waiting for Heather to come back. They needed a suspect because now that I know what I know now, they really needed a suspect if he was watching Heather, if he was watching for, they needed a suspect. So when they had seen the film of the Bronco, they hit the jackpot. They had a man who was accused of rape a year before. They had a man who had that had been accused of wearing a mosquito netting, and the crime was committed in broad daylight. So instead of them doing police 101 work and finding out what Marty Dill looked like at the time, they still have not admitted Marty Dill was bald. In fact, they've gone to great lengths, as you know, to deny. I mean, Marty Dill was blamed and framed for the entire day. Marty Dill was blamed. At 2 months, Lieutenant David Osborne told me this: go on with your life. Marty Dill abducted Heather. Marty killed Heather. Marty killed himself, and he took his secrets to his grave. The only part of that sentence is true is Marty took secrets to his grave.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, and I'm eager. I want this whole story told, but I'm eager to get to the information that you and I have talked about over the last few days, um, that hasn't been heard, that needs to be heard. But we've got to tell Marty's story to get to that, or it's not going to play out for Heather, in my opinion. So
Right.
Marty Dill is accused of this. What happens over the next few days and weeks? They do they take the Bronco in, the little red Chevette? Um, how when does all that play out?
The artist did a sketch of the man who was described by Michelle Morgan as having seen a girl being held by her hair with her face pressed against the windshield, but she described a man with long sandy blonde hair, too big for the car. And the Lorette Chevette was a 78 or 79. It had a maroon colored door. So even though the police did a sketch and it did turn out exactly like Mike Shelton, although it's short dark hair and a beard, which that is Mike Shelton, he was not sandy blonde hair too big for the car, which would have been and could have been Christopher Below. I had to find the red Chevette. I found it at Bobby Stoneberger's rental home on Gold Mine Road in Roberts. State police never did anything with it. I even took Heather's hair and put it in that Chevette to see if they would check it. They did not. They didn't bring it in for any kind of DNA testing at all, and it ended up being demolition. It did belong to the man who was supposed to have met Heather at the time she was abducted's best friend. And I have been told that that little red Chevette was like a runaround car. People borrowed it all the time.
So
And
it's an extra one that if somebody needed it, they would loan it out to them.
Mike Shelton actually came. Mike Shelton is the brother in law of Marty Dill. Mike Shelton was known to have borrowed the Bronco many times, and he would chase young girls around in Seabury. I have that verified. Mike Shelton was heard in 98 saying that Heather was accidentally run over when she jumped from the vehicle. Mike Shelton went to a lady by the name of Debbie Jewell home on Sunday morning after this happened, panicked, white as a sheet, wanting her husband to help guide him out of the bottoms. He was driving the red Chevette. She went to state police, Rick, and she stood there and told them Marty Dill was bald as a baby's ass. She used to babysit Joshua, the son. She was very good friends with Marty and Tracy, the widow. She told them that Mike had driven that red Chevette. And you know what they did? They said, thank you, we'll contact you. And they did not take her name, her number, not any contact information. So 20 years later, let me get my dog.
Sure.
Hush, hush. Anyway, 20 years later, she goes back to post 16 and she tells them, I told you in the week after Marty's death that Marty was bald. And then she tells them this. She said, I went to see Tracy, and all Tracy said was, all I could do was scream when I seen the mess in the Bronco. Now, there were 4 loud, hurtful screams reported to the Kentucky State Police at 8 o'clock the night Heather was taken by Joyce Trainer and Clarence Crowley, the neighbors of the Deals. Now, state police had this report that there were screams heard. So Tracy pled the fifth, November the 7th of 95, and I started writing her letters. I started hanging ribbons up and down John Steele Road, begging her, please just tell me, was Heather still screaming 7 hours after she was abducted? State police and Tracy takes me to court for harassment 8 months after Heather was taken, and state police were waiting outside of the courtroom to testify against me. The judge asked Tracy to read a letter that I had written, which I was just begging her, please, to tell me if Heather was still screaming. 20 years later, Rick, I have to find out that those screams were Tracy Deal screams at what she saw a mess in the Bronco.
And she
And I,
could have just easily told you, no, it was me screaming. But so you went to jail a couple of times over this.
no, I've threatened to go to jail. It
Oh,
was
you were threatened. Okay, so you never actually got
no.
arrested.
As soon as the judge let Tracy read the letter that I'd written, she looked at her and she said, "Oh, you think this is harassment?" So the judge dismissed. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, the judge dismissed
I
it.
mean that wouldn't have stopped you anyway. I mean, just just knowing you now, like 20, 30 years of this. So there was a KSP officer in the area on that day of the abduction, helping someone out that was stuck in the mud or whatever. So there was somebody in the area. And what baffles me, and we're fixing to jump into the new information, what baffles me is the amount of evidence that you have collected yourself uh, over the past 30 years, the relentless work that you have put into your daughter's case. Uh, girl, you just by doing this, you should get like some kind of honorary criminal justice degree or something from some college because I don't have all the documents. I have a lot of documents that you have sent me, but I don't have nothing compared to what you have collected over the last 30 years. Um,
I just
there,
don't understand, Rick, how they took me to court for harassment, knowing that Tracy was screaming. How to this day I have just sent emails to Ramsey Dowd, the special prosecutor, Department of Criminal Investigation, and to the state police begging them, why won't you've already granted Tracy immunity in 2006, so tell me why you won't just find out what she saw in that Bronco. She saw something that was such a mess that the neighbors reported those screams as being four loud, hurtful screams coming from a female. See,
like a
yeah,
traumatic screams.
yes. So she either saw, God forbid, Heather's body after Mike Shelton had run over Heather. See, Mike Shelton came and picked Marty up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I had proof early on from East End pawn shop owner Don Parker. He told me Marty wasn't even on the beach. Marty was behind his shop at Larry Lyons Lawnmower Shop working on lawnmower. And KSP files even confirm Tracy having said, I was wanting Marty to cut the grass, and it was like 11 o'clock. And then she looked out and saw him leave with Mike Shelton at 3 o'clock. So did Tracy see Heather's body in that Bronco or in the truck? And why? Why? Even in 2006, when the FBI and Bill Markwell granted Tracy immunity, how did they not remember those screams and find out if it was Heather in the
Wow.
Bronco?
You know, you mentioned to me that this is one of the largest political cover-ups here locally. Um, and I want to touch back on Mr. Deal and what happened to him because a lot of that, I mean, all this goes hand in hand with what we're talking about. Um, the whole day of him barricading himself in, you know, you said earlier that the only thing he took to the grave was his secrets or what he knew about this. There's a lot that we could like we could go so many routes on this. And I told you earlier, I cannot wait for Shay McAllister to get a hold of this because she is the professional one on this.
She's
Um,
got it. She's
I
got it.
can't. She's gonna tear it apart. Like
Is
so, but with Mr. Deal barricades himself in his mobile home, and that kind of leads up to why Tracy pled the fifth or
no.
was granted immunity, or how does that work in? So let's talk about that real quick.
Tracy pled the fifth November the 7th of 1995, which was just
Okay. Okay.
weeks after. But when when on July the 29th of 23, when I opened that audio that was labeled about Tracy and it wasn't anything about Tracy, there is so much in that call. I want you to put that out there because Bill Polk, the deal's attorney, is telling the state police that Marty doesn't match that description at all. Basically, the same thing I'd been bringing him for 28 years at that time. That Marty
Yeah.
was 5'10", 180 pounds, and bald. Okay, but there's more in that call because Bill Polk is saying Marty's in delicate condition. Don't like don't agitate him. His exact words were, "I really don't know a family member who could go in because he and his dad were estranged." And then Bill Polk says, "Wait till daylight and let me go in, and the first thing I will do will ask Marty about the victim." When I got the state police's files and saw that there were two shots heard, there was arguing, there was yelling, it makes me wonder if Marty was asking to speak to his attorney, Bill Polk. It makes me wonder if, well, I ask and sent that one file to all agencies, U.S. Marshal, FBI, U.S. Attorney, asking, you know, Bill Polk didn't get to talk to Marty Deal. And why does this report list the SWAT and search and rescue team and the hostage negotiator's name, but they don't say a word about who was yelling, what the argument was about, and the thing that bothers me the most, not one person mentioned Heather's name. Now, they had a search warrant, Rick, to get in the Deal property, and of course, Heather's whereabouts was listed. They never mentioned her name. The only one that wanted to was Bill Polk. But now that I know there's 111 pages missing from that report about the two shots and arguing, was Marty asking to speak to his attorney? Only Ernie Green, the uncle, knows, and possibly some of those.
So who is Ernie Green?
Ernie Green is Marty Dill's uncle. He was
Okay.
an ex-major with the sheriff's department, and he was
Was it with the Henderson County Sheriff's Department or the city police?
I think it was the sheriff's department.
Sheriff's Department.
Major. He was a major, and
Okay.
he stepped down due to sexual harassment. I was told, but
Well, how does he fit into this?
that's what I mean. He's the uncle, and when Bill Polk is saying, "I really don't know of any family member that could come in," because he and his dad was estranged. Sonny Deal, Marty's dad, came in and, according to the report, brought his son Elavil and Prozac. Ernie Green shows up. I'm gonna have to go get some water.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead and go get you
But
some water.
who else was there? I wish we were face to face. Who else was there? I'll do this when I get back.
Okay.
Who else was there? According to Susan DeWitt, the KSP detective who was there, she told me in 2003 that Tim Wathall was there. Of course, I
But
tried.
hold on.
Yes, yes, yes.
The same guy that made the 911 call or the 911 call, the witness?
The eyewitness was at the trailer the night of March.
Why is the eyewitness at the trailer of the suspect at the time?
The same reason he was at post 16 every time I showed up. The same reason that he and Lieutenant Osborne, who he calls Dave from the very beginning, he took a boat across the river and found Heather's bathing suit bottoms and her towel. The,
Tim
eye,
did?
the eyewitness and Lieutenant Osborne found Heather's bathing suit bottoms. Yes.
Okay, okay. This is okay. Hold on. Let me. What you just said makes no sense of why that would happen. Okay, Tim Walthall is the witness who witnessed the abduction of Heather.
Yes.
Tim
The same,
Walthall.
right. The same one that says calmly, I've been waiting 25 minutes for her to come back.
Okay, so he is also on scene at Mr. Dill's residence the night he barricaded himself in. He shows up to KSP post when you show up.
Right.
Were they like just toting this witness because that's what he is a witness, right? Are they
I
just
don't,
toting him around? I mean, I've never heard that, and I'm not a law enforcement officer. I have friends that are, and I can ask them, but I've never heard them of taking a witness to a barricaded situation. What was he there for? Was he going to talk to Mr. Dill?
well, his
Or
name is not listed in the report, of course. And when I confronted Susan DeWitt at her home, she denied saying it. And then when I tracked her down the next day to the Commonwealth Attorney's office in Davis County where she worked, she literally hung up on me, denying that I even talked to her the night before at her home.
so you were told that he was there,
I was told he was there, and Susan DeWitt is the one who told me.
and then you have witnessed him. You have seen him with your own eyes when you would show up to KSP post 16.
Oh, Rick, for 4 years, I thought this man was my hero because he would show up. He was always there at post 16. And right before the 1 year anniversary, they called me in and I was alone. And I remember David Osborne pacing the floor and Tim Walthall was sitting there with his attorney. Well, I didn't know why he needed an attorney. I remember I had some lip gloss to roll out of my purse and they thought it was a microphone or something. I remember that. And then Eddie Jones was his attorney, which Eddie Jones, Mike Herron, and Paul Lloyd were busted for drugs in 2002. But this is what made me start recording this eyewitness. I stood right next to him, and I've got a little yellow piece of paper. I've taken notes in journals this whole time. On July the 27th, which is ironic because that's the day that God gave me those words years later. This was 97. I stood right next to him and I heard him laugh as he told the story of how he has businesses in South America and how his workers work so cheap. They work for pennies every day. So when they fall off to their death from the handmade elevators, he laughed at how easily they were replaced. So after he told me the story of how he'd gone to the morgue and he had seen to make sure that Marty was the one who did this, that the back of Marty's head was blown away, he saw gray brain matter, and he had chopped all that long hair off with scissors. And I remember on the recording saying, I'm so sorry you had to see that. Well, I met Marty's mother on year 4, and you have the investigative report there. She tells me plainly, there was not even an exit wound, Sarah. There
It
was
was it was a 22 caliber revolver,
right.
and if there would have been an exit wound, it would not have been like you described, like he described.
No.
Um, and again, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but my experience, I've never seen that with the 22.
Well,
Uh,
Marty's mother not only told me that there was no exit wound, she also described to me, and this was 2000, well, 4 years after the fact, and she wrote a letter in 2003 that I gave to state police on Marty Dill's, her son's last birthday, which was August the 21st of 1995. She saw him walking up the backyard as she was looking through the kitchen window, and she didn't even recognize him because his head shone in the sun. He was so bald.
so
So
you so his head glistened like that nickel-plated
yeah,
revolver.
there you go. There you go.
Oh, my word. And this is this takes so many turns, and I can't wait for somebody more professional in their line of work to. I'm speaking about Shay, obviously, to really tear this thing apart. Okay, so we've got the bases down of what happened. This is going, and it's a lot. You've called it the largest political, and not only you, many people that's involved
Well,
have called
somebody
it.
told me years ago, and I really am trying to remember who it was. A journalist. It was a it was a professional person that did not get involved, but they told me, Miss Teague, it's going to take public shame and media coverage because this is one of the largest political cover-ups in the tri-state history. That's what I was told years ago.
And that is where your lawsuit comes in.
Yes.
Okay.
I
So
filed one in 2013 where I named Susan DeWitt. I named all these officers. I mean, I spent a lot of time and all I wanted. I didn't know any other way to do anything because I had filed open records. I have filed appeals. I have filed FOIAs, which is Freedom of Information Act, and appeals. I stood in front of, I remember Captain Robert Schultz one year and showed him the 3 jail records. You've got those. It's all 3 of them say bald. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, I'm sure they meant brown." And then he looked at me and said, "Miss Tig," and I've got this in an email. He said, "You can file all the open records you want. You will not get anything." And the last tape conversation I had with Sergeant Jonathan Whitaker before Lieutenant Pryor came on Heather's case September the 22nd, 3 years ago. I've yet to hear his voice, but the last conversation I recorded with Sergeant Whitaker, he says, well, I was telling him, I said, the DNA will not be Marty Deal. The DNA will not be Marty Deal. He said, "How do you know that?" He said, "I talked to a coworker and Marty had that long hair a week before this happened. And they all knew, Rick. They all knew on day 4. They have known all these years." As I stood in front of them, I would be shaking. Look at this. I was excited at first when I came in and said, Marty was bald. Marty wasn't the one who did this. And then what happened the night that Marty was killed. David Osborne asked us to come to post, and he said Marty Dill just killed himself, and he did not mention Heather, but he yelled
now,
out,
the night that happened, there was 2 shots.
arguing and
Yeah.
yelling.
Yelling, and who was it? I can't remember who was in the home with him.
Ernie Green, the
That was
uncle,
who was a police officer at one point in time.
Major, yes.
Okay, so 2 shots.
But see, I didn't know that until I got the state police's files after 2022. But David Osborne told us that night that he yelled out, "I'm not going to do 10 to 20." Well, I went into post 16 the next morning because everybody that I talked to said 10 to 20 is kidnapping. That's not murder. So as soon as I went to post 16, and I don't remember if Tim Wathaw showed up that day or not, but I was saying, David, Lieutenant Osborne, 10 to 20 is kidnapping. Heather could still be alive. And he looked at me and said, he yelled out 20 to life. And then in their own investigative report, they put that statement as being what Marty Deal had written in the suicide note. So when I met Marty's mom, she told me, she said, Sarah, she actually highlighted 4 statements, which you have that.
And you've seen this. Have you seen the suicide note?
This is what happened. I got the investigative report. I don't even think I let Chip know that I had the investigative report. So I asked him, I said,
Now, this is some information that nobody's heard before.
right.
This is new. So we're into the new stuff. All right, go ahead.
So went into post 16 or Marty's mother said that all that was written in the suicide note was, "Please forgive me," in block letters printed. I sent that to you, how it looked. "I am sorry." And then he signed his name. The signature was at the bottom. So we went to post 16, Chip and I did, wanted to see a copy of the suicide note. And like I said, I had already had the investigative report knowing that
You'd already done your homework before you even got there.
Marty Dill's mother had told me, but I wanted to see it for myself. I wanted to see it. So they pulled up the suicide note, and yep, there it is. Please forgive me. I am sorry. And he signed it underneath. I didn't confront him that day, that they had absolutely lied to me about
So
what's
they
in the.
told you on the suicide note he had wrote, "I'm not doing 20 to life" or
That's
whatever.
what David Osborne changed his statement the next morning when I went to him. He said, no, Marty yelled out, I'm not going to do 20 to life. And then they put it in their investigative report. So,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, as what the suicide note said. And had
Okay.
I not met Marty's mother, I wouldn't have known. Had I not gotten their own files, I wouldn't know. But that's how God has been revealing things all these years, especially after July the 27th, 2023.
So let's start there. Let's talk about that. That's where we're at, July 27th, 2023. The lawsuit, you start the lawsuit. Let's talk about that lawsuit. What happens with it? What do you file in it?
Okay.
Where
I
does
had
it go?
I had actually called Chip and let him know that what I had discovered on July the 27th or July the 29th. God had given me the words July the 27th. On July the 29th is when I heard Bill Pope. So I asked Chip, I said, is there a statute of limitation on discovery? Because this is huge. This is huge that I have fought for 28 years at that time, presenting statements from family and friends, even Tracy Dill's sister. And you've got that where they had gone to the jail and how shocked they were that all of his long, beautiful hair was gone. So when I called Chip and asked him, is there a statute of limitation on discovery? He said, yes, it would have been a year. So July the 29th of 2024 would have been a year. And of course, I chose to file it on another anniversary, July the 26th of 2024. Okay, I had sent Mr. McKee, the prosecuting attorney, a request and information about the 2008 call that we heard with the wig and mosquito netting on it. That call, along with the audio of the meeting, which they usually record the meetings, but that call and the recording of the meeting of that day when Tim Wathall was telling a female that whoever did this wore a wig and mosquito netting, and that the call is disappeared, then that's when Mr. McKee pointed me to the Department of Criminal Investigation. Rick, he told me this needs to go to the Department of Criminal Investigation. He said, I want you to send it to Greg Wolf. Now, Greg Wolf was with the Department of Criminal Investigation before the administration changed. So when I filed the lawsuit, July the 26th, 2024, Ramsey Dallum had already contacted me May the 1st of 2024. So she told me on May the 1st, she said, Miss Teague, this needs to go to the criminal investigation and address it to public corruption. So she let me know, she said, I am not an investigator, but when there's something to prosecute, that's my job. So as you know, she asked me to file a formal complaint. Well, I spent 10 months. I didn't file just one complaint. I made sure that I shared personal experiences like standing in front of state police with that laminated poster, shaking and crying, begging them to see that Marty Dill wasn't the one who did this. And they would laugh and mock, literally just laugh at me. Ramsey Dallum, on February the 17th of this year, took Heather's bathing suit bottoms from state police and sent them to a private lab called Bodie in Virginia. Now, we've not talked about the time,
Right.
and we need to talk about when the FBI came to me in 2005. The FBI,
Okay.
the FBI
Well,
came to me.
so I was literally just reading something that's so funny that you brought that up because I was literally reading that. What they come to you in 2005? Do they come to you again in 2006?
No, no.
No.
I'll explain that it wasn't 2006. There's so much to keep up with.
Well,
This is
and the reason why, so it says here, and one of the things you sent was the FBI and the KSP was at my home in February of 2006 because the search of the garage floor.
the Avery property. That I correlated that with the time frame that Tracy was granted immunity by the
Yeah.
F and
Okay.
Bill Mark. Now, according to Mr. McKee, and you have that also, a state attorney cannot legally grant immunity. In fact,
So it says, according to Mr. McKee, Mr. Markwell, being a state attorney, could not legally grant her immunity. You presented that file to who did you presented that file to? Whoever you needed to see it. Yeah. And that's it was on Mr. Markwell's letterhead, right?
well, this
The
has happened. Um, I had seen in my files, and of course, I've got like 5 huge notebooks full. And I knew, I mean, I've kind of got a photographic memory. It's not as good as it used to be. But I told Mr. McKee, I said, Tracy Deal was granted immunity in 2006 by the FBI, Jerry Garner, and Bill Markle. He said, I said, could you find that file for me? Because I've got so much to go through. Well, my grandson was with me, and he said, Mimi, you put that file in, you put that one information in a yellow folder. Well, this is how God worked that out, because I had asked Mr. McKee to find it, and then he let me know it would not be legal. And then I looked over in the drawer, and there it was. I had put it in a separate. So I took a picture, sent it to Mr. McKee, and all he could say was, "That is Mr. Markle's letterhead." So, in other words, whereas he was saying it would not be legal if Mr. Markle did that, then he saw the file and saw that it had happened.
Wow. Okay, so let's go back to 2005,
Okay.
where they come to your house.
The FBI came to my home, Jerry Garner, and Samantha Deegan was a victim's advocate at that time. They came to me, Rick, to tell me this: we need you to get an attorney and you need to sue Kentucky State Police Post 16 because the evidence that they had taken from the Bronco and given to state police had been found 10 years later still sitting in evidence.
So
10.
they never tested any of that. They never sent it off. And of course, obviously, in 1995, DNA testing was a little different than it is now. Now it's ridiculous what they can do with a little bit of DNA. So they didn't test any of that stuff.
All I got in the police report was that they had tested Heather's bathing suit bottoms for semen, and there was none. Although they kept telling me Heather was raped in this area, and so by the time 2022, okay, let's get back to the FBI. They told me to get an attorney to sue the state police.
Mhm.
This was 10 years.
So
Okay,
who told you to get an attorney?
the FBI, Jerry Garner,
So you
Jerry
have
Garner, and
a larger law enforcement agency, if you will, a special agency telling you, hey, there's some stuff going on and you probably need to take action on it.
well, the thing that I know now is Kentucky State Police tried every step of the way to stop me from saying Marty Deal was bald. They tried every way to stop me. At 2 months, I told you what Lieutenant Osborne said. And then the FBI comes in, tells me to get an attorney to sue them. And then when they saw that, well, my then attorney, Chip Adams, he had just gotten out of law school. So he didn't know where to start.
Right.
So one day, Samantha Deegan and Jerry Garner sat in my dining room, and Samantha said, all you have to tell, you need to light a fire under Chip's ass. All he has to do is file. The judge will immediately issue a gag order, and they will settle with you for, say, $5 million. But the only stipulation will be you cannot mention the Kentucky State Police. Yes. So this is what happened on January the third. On January the 30th of '08. Now the FBI had been with me almost 2.5 years at that time. So Chip and I turned in the recorded conversations that I had made with Tim Wathaw. Okay, that day the state police took the FBI off Heather's case. The FBI even said state police are powerful people. The regular people
Sarah,
don't know this.
do
The
you
F
still have, I don't mean to interrupt you, but do you still have those recordings of those conversations with Tim?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The day on January the 30th of '08 when we turned these conversations in, Detective Carter pops off, well, what about your past? And I just start crying. I'm like, I'm here to talk about Tim Walthall. He said the back of Marty's head was blown away, and that's a lie. This is not true. This is not true. Jerry Garner, I was tending to this precious couple. That's what I did.
So they tried to turn around and say, "What about your past?"
Yes, they did. That's what I'm telling you. Every step of the way, instead of acknowledging that Marty Dill was bald or anything that this eyewitness said that wasn't true, they would try to mock and shame me. So Jerry Garner calls me and he says, Sarah, they just took us off Heather's case. He said, I won't be far away. I'm Homeland Security. So in 2008, when information came to me from James Hendricks' ex-wife, she let me know that James Hendricks had met Heather the night before this happened. Okay, so I called Jerry Garner and I say,
So
Jerry,
who is this Hendricks guy?
James Hendricks was the Henderson police officer who became
Okay.
FBI later.
Okay.
Okay, so I went to Jerry Garner, called him and said, James Hendricks. I'd never heard the name before. So Jerry said this, you need to check with John Nevels, the sheriff's department, because there would have been a report filed. So I called John Nevels and he says, yes, Miss Teague, we all remember that here in the dispatch that James Hendricks had met Heather on Hayes boat ramp. She was asleep and he just asked her to leave. There was no report made. So I called Jerry Garner back and I said, Jerry, according to John Nevels, there was not a report filed. He said, you need to call him back. He said, they make a report even if they pick up a dog off the street. So I called John Nevels again. He told me again, no, there was no report filed. Uh, so I go back to Jerry Garner, and next thing I know, now this is February the 18th of '09, when the FBI had been taken off Heather's case January the 30th of '08. Jerry Garner brings James Hendricks to my home. Of course, I had recorders all over the house, so I've not only got the meeting recorded, but I also have it transcribed word for word. Jerry Garner was like a totally different person. He was like a cat on a hot tin roof, just really nervous. And I kept saying, well, James, Mr. Hendricks, whatever, why are you even here? And they let me know that he was working pornography division in Bluegrass, Arkansas. And this is what he said. He said, I came to clear up a rumor. I saw your daughter 3 weeks prior. Jerry Garner already knew it was the night before, and he made sure that I heard James Hendricks tell him that he had seen Heather, because I had to declare Heather legally deceased when Chip could not file the lawsuit. I was appointed the executress of Heather's estate in order for me to get the FBI's files. And in these files, and you've got that one of Heather's last known whereabouts being 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the exact same place that she met James Hendricks the morning this happened. This is also what the FBI wanted me to know. Heather's abduction is strongly linked to drugs, prostitution, public corruption, and strip club in parentheses. They also wanted me to know that the FBI had contacted the Kentucky State Police, and this document says that that the FBI had received a FedEx and an email claiming the men or the persons, they're all redacted, who murdered Teague. Two or three paragraphs down lower, it says Kentucky State Police are keeping this a secret. You have no idea how many agencies I have sent that file to. I have faxed it to the U.S. Attorney, the FBI, DCI, Ramsey Dallum, State Police, U.S. Marshal, because there's names that the FBI wanted me to know, that the state police had their names, who murdered Teague. And it says state police are keeping a secret, which they still are. They still are. So these files, when I got, there was about 5 that I was really concerned about, and I called the FBI Owensboro. Spoke with Agent Paul Pape, asking him about Heather's last known whereabouts. And the thing about that one file, Rick, is that in the top right corner, it has WP program. So when I asked Agent Pape, I said, "Can I come in and bring these files? I need these explained." He said, "Miss Teague, it will do you no good to come here." He said, "You need to send those to the Office of the Inspector General in Washington, D.C." I did. I talked to Agent Mike McDonald with with the Office of the Inspector General, and he said, "Miss Teague, this is really weird." He said, "Your files went from the Department of Justice to the FBI inspections to the FBI investigation department." He said they need to go to public corruption criminal activity. So the last person I spoke with in 2008 was Sergio Galvan with public corruption department. And it was like they knew, but they weren't going to tell me. So that led me to think, could Heather be in a witness protection program? There's something so wrong here. Could she be in witness protection? So
So why
I,
why do you think maybe she could be in witness protection? What would lead her there?
because in the state police's files, Heather went to Judge Anita Ivy about underage girls in prostitution. So if Heather was seen at parties with James Hendricks, which she was, so that leads all evidence points that Heather was a confidential informant working with James Hendricks. Now, James Hendricks became FBI, like I told you, like a year and a half later. But James Hendricks, about 3 years ago, was took an early retirement because he got in a lot of trouble for sexual harassment of 8 different women. He was called a skilled predator. So this all goes back to the day that Heather was taken. If Tim Wathall was watching Heather for her boyfriend to come down to buy drugs from her, the man she was seeing was 43 years old, my age at the
And
time,
Heather was 23.
nothing like anybody she would ever have been physically attracted to. But he even told me that she had recorded him and had put something in the ceiling at Air Equip where she worked. He also worked there. And this is the big thing. He said, "I told her to not undo her bathing suit top." Okay, we had a lead in 2012 where
Wait, who told her not to do that?
her boyfriend, the
Okay.
drug who was supposed to have met her at exactly the time she was abducted. So when this young man came to me in 2012, and I recorded it also, he said, "I was on the beach and I looked up and I saw a little silver car. He's colorblind." And he said, "I saw a little man, scraggly with scraggly hair, wearing long pants with a gun." I think Chris Belo abducted Heather and took him to this little car because if Heather was setting Robin Lewis up, and I don't know if we should put his name out there and all this or not, but this is what happened. Jonathan Hollowell, the man who came to me with this story, he said, "I heard the guy say, 'I told you to not undo your bathing suit top.'" So this is my theory. Heather knew that Tim Wathall was watching her. Why else would she put her chair directly across from his home? Did she think she was being protected? And when Robin Lewis didn't show up, did James Hendricks, who she had probably found out something about with underage girls and prostitution, did he set up Chris Belo to abduct Heather? And was Robin Lewis waiting in the background because he knew that he was about to be busted? That's just a theory, but it goes right along with
So
why
your theory, yeah, your theory is that maybe possibly Heather was a CI.
absolutely.
Tim Wathall was planted there to keep an eye on her for this setup.
Right. Right. And she disappeared on
That
his
would
watch.
explain, if
Yes.
that's true, that would explain why Mr. Walthall is allowed to be at the mobile home of Mr. Deal on the night that he's barricaded and takes his life. That would
The mayor
explain why he
there.
is in KSP all the time. Um, That's interesting. Like, and I don't want to go down like conspiracy theory rabbit holes, but you absolutely could take this case in so many directions. And we talked about that. You talked about the abduction. You talked about the protection program, and there was a couple other theories that you thought would play out, would line up with this stuff, but it just speculation and this is just me speculating. It seems like it possibly could be some kind of political cover up incident. Yeah.
You remember me telling you that Samantha Deegan, the victim's advocate, became FBI
Yes.
the next year. Okay. On a Friday night, and I won't ever forget it. I was sitting, we just had got a computer. I had just gotten a phone. It was in 2008. She was trying to call me. So we were messaging. She said, I'm trying to call you and it keeps going to voicemail. I said, I don't know how to do that. She was blocking her number. So finally, in an email, this is what she says: I'm in Milwaukee Monday morning. Here is my phone number. I want you to call me. I'm about to be fired, but I want you to call me at this number Monday morning. I did. She said, Sarah, she said, let's put Heather into like a few files. Let's say she was raped. Let's say she was run over. Let's say she was sold. She said, what about the WITSEC program? I said, what is that? And she said, witness protection. I said, well, I have no more proof of that than I do that she was raped or sold or run over either. And she said, okay, I'm going to tell you what Jerry and I learned while we were there. She said, Heather was hired by the Democratic Party. She said, don't ask any questions. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, I called FBI. The victim's advocate said she was fired. Was Samantha fired?
So what are they meaning by she was hired by the Democratic Party and don't ask questions? So let's ask those questions. Anybody watching this has any information on what they may be talking about or know? Let us know, comment, reach out to Miss Sarah or myself, because that's kind of, that's pretty broad, hired by the Democratic Party. Was she hired as an entertainer for the Democratic Party, for maybe some politicians, or was she hired to do some journalism work for the Democratic Party, or how does that fit in? Because it's a little, that's pretty broad to say, and then say don't ask any questions.
Well, later when I got all of the FBI files and the state police files, I saw Heather had confronted a judge about underage girls in prostitution. That's enough right there to, I mean,
Yes, start a
yeah,
wildfire.
yeah, yeah.
So what happened? We'll get back to the lawsuit. So you file the lawsuit. They say, hey, if you don't mention KSP again, we'll give you X amount of dollars.
No, that's the lawsuit we didn't file.
Okay, that's the one you did
That
not.
was
Okay.
what the FBI wanted us to file in 2005, 6, and 7. And
Okay.
yeah, so, but the other thing that they wanted then was Heather's case to go federal. And from what I have, and I've sent you, somebody was taken to the federal grand jury
Well,
on,
I mean, it shows that the FBI got involved rather quickly on it,
right.
like almost from the get-go. So would that not, and I'm not 100% sure, but would that not be considered a federal agency taking over the case from what I read really early on?
And somebody was taken to the federal grand jury September the 20th and September the 27th of 95. Of course, those names are redacted.
Right.
And of course, um, in 2002, when FBI crime analysis Glenn Waldy sent KSP a message, and I didn't see this until I got their files. He said somebody had been using Heather's social security number multiple times since her death, and he asked the state police to check with neighbors. And this happened the same year that my daughter Holly received a collect call from Holly, and the state police only found.
Wait, So Holly received a collect call from Holly
Holly received a collect call in the middle of the night, and it was from Holly.
from
Okay,
herself.
yeah. So we
Okay.
report, we reported that call for a trace to state police and FBI. And little did I know I mean, one day I was looking through their files, and there it was, Glenn Wildy, FBI crime analysis, May of 2002, the same year Holly got the call. And the reason that we correlated the 2002 call to it possibly being Heather is because after 7 years, and that was 7 years, that we were told Heather could be declared legally deceased. In other words,
Okay.
if she'd gotten out of here or whatever, then she may have been free to contact Holly. Okay. So what Detective Rasco with State Police found was that Holly Teague Perkins was living in Newport, Kentucky with a Tammy Storch using Heather's social. So the same time that this Holly Teague Perkins was in Newport, Kentucky, Holly Teague Perkins, the real Holly Teague Perkins, was living in Madisonville and had just reported a call. So as soon as I got this file, of course, I called state police. I sent Tim Rasco a letter. I called, and this is how God works too. The number for Glenn Wildy was still active, and Elizabeth Nicole Hensley answered the phone. Elizabeth Nicole Hensley and I were talking for months. Not only was I discussing the call that Holly had gotten and the
So
note,
Elizabeth Nicole Hensley was FBI crime analyst.
right?
How
Because I
crazy is
called
that?
her, yes. So, but get this. After Elizabeth and I were talking for months, and like I say, I sent her a copy of the sketch, the driver's license. I loaded her up.
Right.
What once I saw I had her attention, I sent her all kinds of stuff. So I kept asking state police, you know, we got to find Tammy Storch. She was living with this Holly Teague Perkins, but it couldn't have been Holly. It had to be Heather posing as Holly Teague Perkins because Holly had just gotten the call in Madisonville. Next thing I know, Elizabeth is not allowed to talk to me anymore.
Well, it states here that shortly Holly is, or not Holly, I'm sorry, Elizabeth is removed from the case. KSP had taken Elizabeth off Heather's case.
But they didn't tell me themselves, nor did they allow Elizabeth
Right.
to tell me. I got a message from somebody I'd never heard of before, Mandy Corrigan, telling me the state police have just has taken us off this one lead. So here I'm just devastated. I'm like, please, Lieutenant Pryor, tell me, was that Heather? Could Heather be alive? Why would you take Elizabeth Nicole Hensley off of that lead without explaining to me? And then God shows me the 6 different labels with 3 of those labels with ENH. And I started bombarding state police, Ramsey Dallum, everybody. Could Elizabeth Nicole Hensley, ENH, those initials be the initials in this call? Absolutely. Who else could it be? But they
So,
won't answer me. They won't explain to me why Detective Rasco didn't know about the 2002 call that Holly had just gotten. If it had been 5 years, 2 years, but it was the exact same year that Holly got the call. Now, you tell me how Detective Rasco did not know about that call that had just been reported to state police and FBI. And that still leads me to wonder, was that Heather? Who else would have been posing as her sister? And for them to not explain that to me,
yeah,
Rick,
because back then identity theft wasn't a huge thing. Not a lot of people understood how that worked. You know, what year? And this was in
2002,
yeah.
2002.
So it was still early on. I mean, it happens then, but it wasn't as prominent as it is now. Now it's people do it every day, and it's not they don't have any trouble doing it. It seems like, but even in the early 2000s, identity theft was tough. So how would they get those social security numbers and things like that? The access wasn't as available like it is now.
And the
So
important
could
thing
it?
was, right, Glenn Wildy stressed, check with the neighbors. Glenn Wildy wanted the state police to physically lay eyes on who was posing as Holly Teague Perkins. Now, Glenn Wildy didn't know it was Holly Teague Perkins. All he did was stress check with neighbors. So even though
So, did they not trace that collect call?
evidently not, I never heard back from any of them.
I wonder if that number or that is still available because I feel like they could probably trace it back to whether it was a payphone, a landline, or where, who. If it was a landline, it belonged to somebody personal. A payphone, obviously back then.
Then it was at 147 Celeste Lane, Madisonville, Kentucky, where the call came from, and her phone number was 502 or 270-825-9347. I remember that, but the point is, Glenn Wildy made a point to tell the state police to go check with neighbors, and they did not. So when I wrote to Detective Resco, see, he'd retired, and I knew he was in Sturgis, but I didn't have his address. So I called the post office lady, and I said, I need to get a letter to Detective Resco. She said, Miss Teague, you send it here. I'll make sure he gets it. Of course, I didn't receive anything from him, but still to this day, I'm asking Ramsey Dallum, the Department of Criminal Investigation, Lieutenant Pryor, which, like I said, I've never heard his voice yet, to just please tell me why they would take this
And
FBI off.
he's been on the case for 3 years, and he hasn't contacted you to say, "Hey, I've taken over the case" or anything like that.
I got emails, of course, and
Okay, just no phone
my
calls.
immediate response was, praise the Lord. Are you from internal? Are you from internal affairs? Because I've asked for an internal investigation into this investigation for years. Well, he didn't answer yes or no, and then you have the email. The last time I heard from him was about this DNA. I had asked him, you know, in order for them to send in Heather's bathing suit bottoms after 27 years, it took this mother taken 1,666 names on a petition, and this petition said, "How dare KSP Post 16 tell a mother her daughter was raped in the wooded area where her bathing suit bottoms were found, and they not send them in for DNA testing?" Because by that time, Touch DNA. Okay, so the emails to and from Pryor, which is labeled as DNA lies, I forwarded that to you. At 9 months into testing, on December the 5th of 2022, Heather's bathing suit bottoms, a towel, were sent to the DNA International Lab in Florida. Okay, so according to the email from Pryor, he says the Florida lab at 9 months into testing, and I think I put 6 months in that email. It was 9 months into testing that the Florida lab contacted them wanting more funding. So that means testing had started. At 11 months, get this, the FBI steps in to tell state police that the tests the Florida lab was doing could ruin the evidence. Okay, in this email also, Lieutenant Pryor says Sergeant Whitaker has contacted their Kentucky Central Lab in Frankfort to retrieve those items from Florida. I called the Kentucky lab and spoke with a lady named Marcy Atkins. She said, Miss Teague, we've not heard from them since 2007. So I immediately forwarded the email to the DNA International Lab. I spoke with a lady named Christine Harris. She nor Marcy Atkins are allowed to speak to me to this day. And when I knew that Pryor had said that they were going to retrieve these items from Florida, I kept saying, where are they? Where are they? Where is the last thing Heather wore and the last thing she held on to? Where are those items? They would not answer me. Lieutenant Pryor didn't have the common courtesy to answer me. I had to file an open record request, and I sent that to you. And I learned that they were back. Timothy Payne with KSP had retrieved those items on May the 1st of 2024, the exact day that Ramsey Dallum contacted me. I mean, just heartless, just cold
So
hearted.
where are they at now, those items?
Ramsey Dallum called me on February the 17th of this year and let me know that they had taken Heather's bathing suit bottoms and towel to a private lab in Virginia called Bode, Bode. And I think I sent you the emails I sent to Kelly
Yeah.
at Bode. Of course, I've been calling them ever since the beginning. And when I learned that the state police had gone to the man who was supposed to have met Heather that day to get his DNA, then I knew without a doubt there is viable DNA on Heather's bathing suit bottoms. And Marty Deal has been eliminated, which that's no surprise. But do you think that they would tell me? Do you think for 1 second, if Marty Deal's DNA had been on there anywhere, they wouldn't have held a press conference and just absolutely no? Marty Deal's DNA could not possibly be on those bathing suit bottoms or her towels.
So they're reaching out to people and saying, "Hey, give me your DNA." For there's a reason for that, right? They have you feel like they have found something on those. Uh, the bathing suit bottoms, was that the only piece of evidence that they collected to have tested, or
Besides a towel.
the
Heather,
towel?
the towel that Heather hung on to. And of course, that towel would more than likely have DNA on it because whoever, Christopher Belo is who I think, or this other man, they would have touched DNA on there.
Yeah, and back in the early '90s, early 2000s, touch DNA was one of the main ways they got DNA off of, items like that. Now it's way more advanced, which is awesome that they. It's sad that they've held on to
Well,
these
there's a
pieces
reason
of
why they
evidence
didn't.
for so long.
The reason they didn't send them off in 10 years when the FBI found the evidence, when they told me to get an attorney to sue them, they still forgot about Heather's bathing suit bottoms. They wouldn't have sent them off 27 years later had I not just been on and took a petition and let it out there. How dare you tell a mother that her daughter was raped and not do this? And then you know how that turned out. John Webb did a story of what a disaster the evidence being sent 27 years later
And you can find that article where,
on the Evansville Current Press.
and that's John Webb wrote that article. So Evansville Courier and Press.
Yeah, he's basically the only one who has taken a stand with our family to write about the 2008 call and how it disappeared, how the state police stood in front of Judge Shepard in 2017 denying it even existed. And I just read another email when I remember when we stood in front of Judge Shepard. He looked at Detective Weber, KSP, and he said, "Tell me why this mother is having to fight to hear a 911 call." He said, "I hear them all day, every day." So every step of the way, and even this lawsuit that was
And
dismissed,
how long was it before you heard that 911 call? How many years?
20. They
20
hid it.
years,
They
folks.
hid it from us for 20 years. And let me tell you how that happened. And I have to brag on this man because even though we only had one KSP of 29 years, 11 months, and 3 days today, and a lot can happen in 3 days. I am not claiming 30 days is up yet. Sergeant Jason Pagan called me on February the 3rd of 2016. Chip and I were in court with my grandson. Now, when the 2008 call was played for us with wig and mosquito netting and the female, the whole room was full. I told you there were 4 officers. Sergeant Pagan said, "Can y'all get here now?" Well, God lined it up where Chip and I were right there. We took off to Post 16. It was only Sergeant Pagan. He had been looking for the call with the wig and mosquito netting with the female. He couldn't find it, but he did find the call. After 20 years, I sat there with Chip, and Sergeant Pagan had already told me there's no mention of wig and mosquito netting on this call. So anxiously, I listened, and that's when I had to ask Sergeant Pagan to stop the call because, like I said, the whole scenario of how Heather had been taken was nothing. like what Tim Walthall had told us for 20 years. So I'm like, okay, either the man charged down or he crept down slowly. That's two totally different things. That's not a little thing to be different.
Right.
And then of course after that is when I paid attention that he calmly says, I've been waiting 25 minutes for her to come back. And then little by little, we found out there's 6 different labels for the one call. And Catherine Seabrooks, who was FBI's name, is underneath one. And Elizabeth Nicole Hensley's initials is on 3. Why would there be 6 different labels for the call? And why would they keep it from us for 20 years unless they're protecting this man, Tim Walthall, and him being a federally protected agent who lost his federally protected informant, Heather Danielle Teague? That's her name, Heather Danielle Teague. I have had to correct officer after officer. Oh, that missing girl, that street person, her name is Heather.
Wow.
She is coming home. And I,
And we'll get back into the dismissal of your lawsuit, but at this point, Miss Sarah, I feel like you just want Heather.
have asked for immunity to be granted. We just had a lead. What I was going to tell you too is while I was putting together these pictures of Heather for you and for Shay McAllister, I also had to send you and her a picture that was brought to me on February the 14th of 98. The artist who did the sketches called me and he said, I found Heather. She's been killed on a snuff film. Well, I started crying and I threw up and I called my good friend Sherry in Provento. She's my powerful prayer warrior. She came over to be with me because I told Clay Hutchison, you can't just tell me that over the phone. You bring me that picture. So he shows up with that picture that you have. It's a picture of Heather lying face down.
And it's an actual picture. It's not a drawing
No,
for
it's
those
a
listening.
yes, it's a horrible picture. And it's
It's
from a rapez.com website. Now, Clay says that how he found that, it just accidentally popped up when he was searching Morgan Nick, the missing little girl. That was his story. So I'm looking at this picture, and the face does look like Heather. So he's telling me that Heather's back teeth were knocked out and that she had been killed on this snuff film. And then I look closer and I'm like, okay, Heather's got a round red birthmark on her right butt. So he takes a little pencil and he draws where he says they're color pixels. In other words, continuing to make me believe that Heather is dead, continuing to make me believe she was killed on this snuff film. So the next morning I go into David Osborne and I show him, and he kind of slides it across the table and he says, huh. He said, that girl is at least 5'6" and 130 pounds. He said, that whole thing is staged. I said, well, that's not really the point. The point is, Clay Hutchison told me that Heather had been killed on this film and that he had found the house where the pictures were taken. He had found the Polaroid camera and he even measured the rungs on the side of this table. So will you please go get DNA? Would you please go find this table that he's talking about? To even though, yeah, that's Heather's face, but the body is way too big. Although the shape of her breasts are identical, but this girl has big, long fingernails, and of course, this mother's heart goes to: was Heather alive for a few years? Had she
right.
gained weight? And
Did they dress her up, put those fingernails on her, things like that. And just comment on that picture when you sent that to me, and I opened it up. It was
I know I should have warned you.
disturbing. Yeah, that's okay. It was pretty, and the uncanniness of just looking at the poster behind you right now of Heather and seeing that picture, like
The face is like her, doesn't it?
it is crazy how close of resemblance those two are. Whether it was Heather or not, either way, if it wasn't, it sure the hell looks like her,
Well, that could have
and
been
it
Heather's
really
back
looks like.
You know, I mean, I
Could
don't know
be.
how it works, but what I don't understand, and another thing I've asked to explain, is that a few years later, even though David Osborne did not bother to even bring Clay in to question him about why he would tell me that, or even try to find the table where Clay says he found the table that Heather was laying on. They take this picture, the bars on the, you can see bars in the back of that picture. They
Right.
use that to say they found a room where where Heather had been killed, and they organized a search. Yes, they organized a search, Rick, for Sportsman's Club Lake, where they said they had a lead that somebody had dumped something from a boat in this lake. Now here it is, August the 26th of 1995. Campers are all around. Even at night, it's lit up. And as we were sitting there watching these divers, the whole place was saying, "This is absolutely ridiculous. In broad daylight, there's no way a boat came out here and dumped a body, you know?" And then, of course, I didn't go into detail of how, well, they used a picture that about the snuff film. They used that even though they didn't follow it through any deeper.
Well,
To
I don't know if the original picture you could tell more details, but just from what I was looking, just to go off of some bars, those bars can be anything, anywhere, you know. Um, so hopefully the picture they went off of had a lot more detail and was able to tell about it. Uh,
no, they didn't care about the picture. They were going through the motions of doing a search because I wouldn't shut up about finding Heather. So that they every single, I mean, they very seldom did a search, but their main goal was to stop me from bringing in evidence that Marty Deal was bald. They wanted me to stop. I mean, who tells a mother at 2 months to go on with your life? He even said take Heather's pictures down. Well, see, that led me to believe at some point in time, and I talked to Ramsey Dallum in an email and prior about this. Okay, if Heather was taken to witness protection, would they go to this extreme link to links? Would they go to these extreme links to make sure somebody ended up dead because that sketch was manipulated to be Marty Deal, and then they made sure that he didn't come out of that trailer alive, and even Bill Polk was pretty much saying, "Don't surround him. Let me go in at
so
daylight."
so are you thinking that I mean obviously Marty wasn't the murderer, but are you thinking that he had information maybe that could have blew this case all wide open at the time?
At the very least, he left with Mike Shelton, his brother-in-law, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the brother-in-law went to Debbie Jewell's home the next morning, driving the red Chevette, needing help pulling the vehicle out of the bottoms. And Mike was heard positively saying Heather was accidentally run over.
Why were they in
So
the bottoms with the red vehicle?
I don't. That's I don't know. Is that where Heather was run over? I mean, Mike Shelton went to a home in '98 saying she was run over. And was that what Tracy saw that
Right.
made her scream? Bottom line is, as I told you, even when Debbie told the state police that Mike had driven the red Chevette to her home the next morning, they didn't talk to Mike Shelton. They didn't even take the red Chevette. They just totally ignored it and have continued to blame this all on Marty Deal.
So
Marty,
so it's obviously a tunnel vision kind of case that they fixed in on. And so let's get back to your to this lawsuit. They dismissed this lawsuit. Let's talk about the lawsuit.
well, if statute of limitation was a problem, February the 17th of 2025, after 29 years, is when Heather's bathing suit bottoms were finally sent in for DNA testing. How could a judge dismiss this? How could anybody? How could the Attorney General, the U.S. Marshal, the U.S. Attorney's Office? How can all of these agencies know without a doubt what these state police have done? Because when I submitted formal complaints for 10 months to the Department of Criminal Investigation upon the advice of Ramsey Dallum, special prosecutor. They cannot deny these evidence. It's from the state police's own files and from the FBI files. How can
So
they
this
all know?
this ain't made up files that you've just taken notes on. These are the original files that the law enforcement agencies have collected themselves that you've submitted.
The judge awarded me all of the state police's files in 2022. I got them, and of course, it's 2,000 pages. I had already had the FBI pages, which is over 300, so I already had those, but I couldn't go through them all by myself.
Right.
I a precious lady from here who lives 3 doors down from me. She found the purchase order. I have another man who has helped me for years. He's the one that put together the 2 shots in Yellen and the 111 pages being missing, which I've not submitted that to the Department of Criminal Investigation yet, but I'm working on that. Um, yes, they've got enough evidence right now to know, and even it was a concern of Mr. McKee that it needed to go to Department of Criminal Investigation, that those 4 officers were in the room with us when the call was played with Tim Walthall and a female, and that call is gone, and even the recording of the meeting is gone. Mr. McKee was instrumental in me getting this to the Department of Criminal Investigation. So how many more months are they going to have to see this evidence? And they do nothing, not even a phone call. Nobody from the Department of Criminal Investigations has ever called me. I get an automated response that they have received it, not a personal touch saying, Miss Teague, we are looking into these concerns. Nothing, not one word.
Wow. Are you going to appeal?
Yes.
I know that was a silly question, but I wanted to ask that.
Well, I do need help in filing this appeal. I don't have help now in filing the rest of it. What I am hoping, and there's something that keeps tugging my heart, that we're not going to have to file this appeal because somebody's about to tell what happened. The Ernie Green, Tracy deal, there's so many people who know. And if Kentucky State Police and the Department of Criminal Investigation, Ramsey Dallum, would do their job, our family would know right now. And we could have had Heather back on day 4 when Bill Polk told Kentucky State Police that Marty Deal didn't fit that description at all, that Marty did not have bushy hair and a beard. That's what hurt so badly, is that we could have had Heather back on day 4. But see, God had other evidently what my daughter stood up for, underage girls in prostitution, and what I have tried so hard for all these years just to bring her home. I have said, I don't care if anybody goes to jail. I want Heather back. And this is what I've asked for in that lawsuit. I've asked for every officer who has mocked and shamed me for 29 years to look me in the eyes as they are hanging Heather's life-size portrait at Post 16, and for $29 million. That's what I was asking for in the lawsuit. Just let me have Heather back. I don't care if anybody goes to jail. I don't care. Just grant these people immunity. There was a lead that came to us in 2000, or came to me. One of the most horrible stories I've ever heard, that Heather was a serial killer abducted Heather. Somebody had ordered him, which I believe with all my heart was James Hendricks, and that Heather was raped and decapitated, and her head was put on this marble estate. I have sent these pictures. A friend went to the Varble estate and found a cistern 1 week, and then 2 weeks later, somebody else went back, and it appeared that this cistern had been messed with. So here I'm saying, okay, they took Heather's head from that area. Now, the rest of this story was that the rest of Heather is in a well behind KG's store in Reed. Okay, so immediately when this lady tracked me down and she said, Miss Teague, I went to state police 2 years ago with this lead. She didn't know that I already had the lead in 2000. She didn't know that that same lead had been submitted to them in 2000. She had gone to a detective with the story, and he told her to go to post 16. So they made her wait 2 hours because I know the detective called post 16 and said, hey, this lady's coming, and this is the story that a serial killer did this, that Marty Deal had nothing to do with this. That was her exact words that she was telling Detective Harmon. So they kept her waiting for 2 hours. She stayed every bit of the time. And when she told them, they were dismissive. She said they just didn't care. She said they just dismissed everything I said. So she tracked me down about 2 months ago and told me this. So I immediately, what did I do? I start calling PVA office, trying to locate who owned KG's store, trying to find the Varba homestead, getting pictures. And then I just said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. This is not my job. So I contacted Mr. McKee and I said, I'm not allowed to speak to Ramsey Dallum, probably, or state police. I'm not sure. But this is what's happened. I sent him pictures to forward to state police of the area where Heather's head may have been removed. And I said, and John Webb wrote about this. I said, could state police just finally do their job? Could they track down these two remaining men besides Chris Velo, who are named, are still alive in this one lead? Could they please just do their job and even find out if this story's even true before we organize a search? I've already had to look at a cistern where I was told Heather was put. That was one of the first stories we were ever told. And
Right.
now it's obvious somebody's messed with that area. Could they just do their job and grant immunity to these two remaining people? I got nothing. I still have gotten nothing.
No response.
It's just a shame and a disgrace what they've done. I mean, this entire investigation hinges on Tim Wathall's story, and not one word he said is true, except that Heather's empty blue and white lounge chair at the water's edge, while I learned later he was right there watching us as we came to the beach that day after we were told by Henderson Police Department Heather had left her car abandoned on Newburgh Beach. There's not one part of this entire investigation that holds honesty or integrity. Had there been any honesty and integrity, as soon as Tim Wathall saw what he says he saw, there would have been a sketch done. And then they could have compared it to what Marty Deal looked like August the 26th of 1995. And Marty Deal
Which
would
was
not
not.
complain. But that didn't happen. No, they didn't do the sketch until after they
So
saw
let
it.
me ask you something. Go back real quick. How long after did they find the bathing suit bottoms?
Well, they found him immediately. But I
Okay.
didn't know until I was on the beach one day and Sergeant Easton was there, the same little sergeant who kind of turned upside down and said, oh, I think a tree's growing out of Marty Dill's head. And if not, his hair is definitely pulled back in a ponytail. Um, I pulled up that day and he had a Polaroid picture of the Bronco. And it was like he was comparing it to a background.
Mhm.
Okay. I still don't know what that means. But I asked him that day, I said, what happened to Heather's bathing suit bottoms? This was 3 weeks after Heather was taken. He said, I knew you would ask sooner or later. He said Tim Wathall and David Osborne found those bathing suit bottoms in the woods with her towel. So I filed records to get pictures from the crime scene and also Heather's bathing suit bottoms. Took a while for Helena Johnson to locate the pictures from inside of the crime scene and Heather's bathing suit bottoms. So in one picture, Rick, they're in the wooded area, just a clump of greenery, and her towel is in another picture. But in another picture, Heather's bathing suit bottoms are like wadded up and tied, not in a plastic bag, not in anything. They're just laying there. And of course, inside the Deal trailer, then I have pictures of that. There's a little detective going around picking up stuff, not even wearing gloves. And of course, you do know that we haven't talked about. There were two shell casings found along with the two shots heard, yelling and arguing. And to my knowledge, a 22 revolver doesn't even eject a casing.
A
And
revolver does not eject casings, and you have to manually do that yourself.
so, and you know from that synopsis of those two shell casings, it's questionable now. Did was Marty shot with his own pistol? It's very questionable because whoever was yelling and arguing, I believe with all my heart, Marty Deal was trying to say, I'm being framed for this. I'm being blamed for this. Mike Shelton run over Heather, and I want to speak to my attorney. And all of those pages are missing.
111 pages still missing.
Pages are missing. So you tell me why the hostage negotiator, the SWAT and search and rescue team members can't be questioned. Tell me why there's a list of them, at least 12. They
Well,
would have known that Tim Walthall was there. They would have known if Marty was yelling. How do these
and
people keep quiet, Rick?
here's the night in question right here. Um,
And then there's another report that says plainly, another shot was heard. I mean, you've got that printout too.
yeah.
Um, how do all of these agencies just do nothing when so much evidence has been presented for a year now?
So that's what really got me was the amount of evidence that has been put forth, not only by you, but by the state, the FBI, that you have basically uncovered and found that's been put away, if you will. The description of the abductor, the very detailed, and again, I urge everyone to um, go listen to that 911. And if I can get the audio downloaded, I'm going to put it on here. It's about 8 minutes long, I believe, of the witness calling KSP. And kudos to the KSP dispatch operator because he was really calm himself. And they're trained to be calm and in hectic situations. Um, but for the witness, I'm telling you, man, and everybody's different. This is just me. It ain't worth a dime a dozen. But if I see somebody that's being abducted and I'm on the phone, I'm going to be hyped up. I'm going to be super excited. My adrenaline is going to be rushing. I'm not going to spend 8 minutes on the phone.
And you sure wouldn't say calmly, well, I've been waiting 5 minutes for her to come back. See, he thought she was coming back. That's what leads me to believe, now that I know she was a confidential informant with James Hendricks, that she actually disappeared on his watch. And of course, there's another theory that Heather wanted to get out of here and she could have staged her own abduction, knowing that since she was reported missing 10 days prior, this would be a great time to not only revenge and reward, which I can't get into that because this
right,
man,
right.
he's evil and he's still alive. But you know that it
Yeah.
was his stepdaughter's mother-in-law who signed off on the search warrant and who Heather confronted. Rick, that is a conflict right there. For Judge Ivy to have signed off on that search warrant, and I didn't find out till 22 years later that Heather had gone to her about underage girls and prostitution. This whole thing is, without a doubt, one of the largest political cover-ups in the tri-state history.
And let me tell you something, Miss Sarah. For the longest time, I always looked up and highly respected our leaders in the community. And now we all make mistakes. We're not perfect. None of us are perfect. But recently, even in our little area, we have been seeing political leadership corruption, leadership embezzlements. These people that we look up to every day that's here to protect us taking from their citizens one way or the other.
And
And
I want you to be sure and put this in there, Rick. When I first talked to Mrs. Dallum, I told her, I said, what you're about to learn is going to break your heart. And I said, it will shatter your faith in law enforcement. And that's the truth. It shattered my faith. I went to him, just running in there the next week. Marty was bald. Marty was bald. Little did I know right then, I became their adversary.
You became a warrior for Heather is what you became. And for 29 years, 30 years, what Tuesday, the 26th, you have more paperwork than I have. Like you burnt my email up. I had to go in and clean my email out.
But see, 2002 and 2003 is also when Allison Goodman had a word from God. When this is all said and done, it will be a wonder to all mankind. And people will be saying, that mother, you stand and declare to God be the glory. That is the exact same year that Glenn Waldy and the FBI were supposed to have checked, our state police was supposed to check with neighbors.
Wow. Well, Miss Sarah, I know there's a lot more. We could spend hours, we could spend days, um, and I would love to, but I want to leave it to the experts. I told you again, I'm a huge fan of Shannon McAllister's, and I can't wait to see what she digs up and digs into. But you know, I'm also familiar with another case, the Andy Wagner case, that the 24-year-old went missing, and it's literally unfolding, minus law enforcement connections. It's literally unfolding the same way. There's no evidence, like she is gone, been wiped off, and her mother didn't last 29 years. Her mother lasted 2 years into it before it took her life. Um, how have you been able to do this for 29 years? Because it's got to be hard losing a child, but it's got to be extremely freaking hard losing a child that you don't know where they are.
I remember this lady came to me. Her daughter had been missing for 9 months. And I remember sitting there on the couch saying, no, this won't go on no 9 months. I'll tell you that. And then on the third week that I was telling you about, when Sergeant Easton was holding that picture of the Bronco up, comparing it to a background, and he told me that Tim Wathaw had found Heather's bathing suit bottoms with Lieutenant Osborne, and they hadn't bothered to tell me. I remember going home that night and hearing somebody scream, and it was me. And somebody said, "We're playing hardball. Something is wrong." And there was a knock on the door, and this young man stood there. He had a box, and he said, "You left this in the attic in Seabury when you moved." I made everybody. I sat there on my front porch. The moon was full. I won't ever forget it. I started taking these treasures out. There was a little shoe that Heather had worn. Heather's a little red granny gown with a little hat for her first Christmas. And Rick, in the bottom of this journal, at bottom of this box was a journal that I had started to Heather when she was 23 months old. An entry dated August the 25th, 1974 read, "I'm so afraid a big man will someday take my Heather away." On August the 26th of 1995, when she was 23 years old, that's what we were told. I know. That gave me the strength to know that there was such a purpose and a plan, because I always knew Heather's life would make a difference. I thought she was going to be famous. None of my kids had what they deserved having, because my life went really sideways. And, but that gave me the strength to continue on. And I remember right before this happened, I said something about Heather writing a book. I mean, we were just so connected. And she looked at me and she says, "Mama, how do you know you won't be the one to write the book?" And the night that she was reported missing, she was so upset and so angry that anybody could think that she would commit suicide. And she told my daughter Holly and Haven, my daughters Holly and Haven, she said, "There's going to be a time to read my writings, but now's not the time." So later, when I got her little journal, she wrote, "Judges in their little black robes telling their little white lies, 12 jurors Then she wrote, I am a poster child. And as you know, she wrote, what I've been living for 29 years, 11 months, and 23 days today. Beside intolerant faces I stand, holding heart and soul in hand, reaching for someone to remember, to comprehend, to recognize my struggle, my desperation. Is there anything left that's pure? Pity spent discriminately is still prejudice. I know addicts of hypocrisy, mockery, the drug of choice. Call out to all the homeless people. Aren't they people without a home?
Hmm.
Have I not been living that, being mocked and shamed and it's just amazing. I
It,
mean,
it's you know, Heather is famous for the wrong reasons, but uh I don't think there's a year or even several months that has gone by in the time that she's disappeared that I haven't come across or heard something, you know. And we all know it really blew up and opened back up when the Mr. Belo thing out of Ohio came about. That kind of like rekindled it, if you will, to the public eye. But even in my teenage years, I can remember hearing about it, you know, when it happened, and then all the way even up until now, you know, obviously. But you know, they say there's a reason for everything, and we may not know the reason, we may not like the reason, but I hope and I pray for you and your family that whatever Heather's disappearance, the reason for that is that it opens some doors and it closes some doors. And I know that this story's been covered so many times, and like I said in my little snippet, that you know we're not going to tell the same old story. That's not what we're doing. We're going to keep this new story alive, and the new story is all this evidence that you're allowed to talk about now, and we just touched on a very small snippet of it, and I'm excited to see what you do moving forward with it. You know, because hey, if I've ever met a bulldog, I think I found it. And to everybody out there, I would never want to go toe to toe with you on anything. So, but I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. And this is my very first Zoom podcast interview. I would have loved to have came up or had you in the studio, but I felt like this was something that needed to be done immediately, you know,
you can see
especially
the back of Heather's room.
I was going to ask is, you know, do you change your pictures out or do you leave those pictures up? You know, are there some that you just kind of on special occasions do you hang a new picture or
This whole room is Heather's room. Everywhere I move, I've had Heather's room. I have this is Heather's room.
wow. Well, I know she'd be proud of you. That's for sure.
I want her back. I want her back.
So if anyone out there that's listening, they can remain anonymous if they have information.
All right.
How
I'm
can they get in contact with you or law enforcement or how do they go about doing that?
bothered to call law enforcement. I've got a, post office box set up now. It's P.O. Box 3 at Girard, Garrard, Kentucky, 40941. I'll be glad to give my phone number 270-836-7643. But somebody can anonymously send a letter to that P.O. box, and I promise I don't care if anybody goes to jail or prison. I do want Kentucky State Police Post 16 and Tim Walthall held accountable for, at the very least, they have tampered with evidence and have obstructed justice. That's different from somebody else writing me telling me where Heather is, because they've not tried to find where Heather is. All they've tried to do for 29 years, 11 months, and 23 days today is to stop me from going any further. It's too late for that now. That Marty Deal was not the man who did this, and that Tim Walthall is not credible.
With that being said, Miss Sarah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Well,
you.
Miss Sarah, thank you so much. And my good friend Frenchie, he always says anytime he ends one of his videos, y'all be kind to each other.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you so much.
Respect, no judgment. Open up, say what you wanna say. Be real, be kind, free speech. Make this a better day. You got a voice, a story.